Welcome everyone to this École des modernités lecture. I'm happy tonight or this morning, depending on where you're looking at this presentation, to welcome Nadia Ugalde Gómez. Nadia is an art historian and a curator with a specific focus on modern Mexican art. She worked for a long time at the National Institute of Fine Arts in Mexico, and she was the curator of a large number of exhibitions devoted to Mexican artists, most specifically Diego Rivera, Frida Kahlo, and their contemporaries. Her publication, which are numerous, and I should only mention a few of them, include Arnold Belkin, The Image as Metaphor, published in 1999, Diego Rivera, The Aesthetic of Dream, published in 2002, Anita Brenner, Vision of an Era, published in 2007, and Diego Rivera, Witness and Protagonist of His Time, published in 2007. Her recent focus in research is government cultural policies, the development of cultural chronology during the 1940s and 1950s, and recently on suicidal artists. I'll be curious to know more about this, Nadia, maybe in the discussion. But tonight's lecture, or today's lecture, is devoted to a peculiar character, I would say, who's Ángel Zárraga, who spent some time in Paris in the 20s and 30s, and which work, and Nadia will focus on this aspect, interrogates the representation of women from an aesthetic that at some point reached the avant-garde towards something quite different in a second phase of his career. The lecture is entitled Ángel Zárraga, a Mexican painter in Paris. And Nadia, the floor is yours. Thank you again for giving this lecture.
No, thank you. Well, good afternoon for you and good morning for us. First of all, I would like to thank your presence and a very big apologies for the delay. And I also want to thank to Monsieur Hugo Daniel for make me this invitation for this international art lecture. Well, let's start. After studying at the Academia of San Carlos, the School of Fine Arts in Mexico, the young painter Ángel Zárraga traveled to Europe to continue his artistic training. In 1904, he arrived in Paris, the city with an effervescent life and important nightlife with its busy cafes and famous cabarets, in the middle of the Belle Epoque, a period of great economic, cultural, scientific, and technological development. The great advance in construction with very important examples of the use of iron and glass. An essential moment for the gestation of the avant-garde and the height of the styles developed at the end of the 19th century. Between 1890 and 1910, a new movement emerged, modernism, which encompassed all the arts, painting, sculpture, architecture, literature, decorative arts, and design that received different names according to the country. Arts and design, in France, it is known as Art Nouveau. It showed authenticity and naturalism. It was inspired by Japanese art and medieval art, rejecting industrial civilization for its damage to nature. Its basic theme was the way line, the combination of plants and human figures. All of the more styles are post-impressionism, symbolism, or the naps. Cradle of the Cubist and Fauvism, a name that, by the way, is due to the art critic Louis Boxels, who will write an important critique of Zárraga's work. Although almost all of these movements originated in the French literary sphere, Many of them will also be embraced by artistic disciplines. Paris, the great modern and vibrant city with 3 million inhabitants, many of them artists from all over the world who settle in the city of light for the atmosphere and possibilities. In the case of Mexicans, in artists such as Diego Rivera, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and Ángel Zárraga himself, among others, traveled to the old continent to complete their knowledge and learn about the innovations of artistic work. It is interesting to note that since the end of the 19th century, there has been a certain Frenchification in Mexico in many aspects and in different areas of Mexican society and cultures. The young Zárraga would be received by the poet Rubén Darío, then honorary consul of Nicaragua and correspondent of the Argentine newspaper La Nación, who, in his capacity as correspondent, made a very detailed review of the Universal Fair of Paris in 19, which met in 1901 and was published under the title Paris 19. After a brief stay, Zárraga entered the Academy of Fine Arts in Brussels to continue his artistic training. Then he would travel through Spain and Italy and return again to Paris. Ángel Zárraga was born in 1886, the same year as the painter Diego Rivera. By the way, something curious and no less interesting are the similarities in the lives of those two Mexican and contemporary artists. We follow the same path. Both were born in cities in the interior of the country. The first, Ángel Zárraga, in the city of Durango, and Rivera in Guanajuato. Both would come to Mexico City from an early age. Both would travel to Europe to continue their learning and would visit almost the same cities. Continuing with the similarities, they will come to Mexico on different occasions to present their artistic production coinciding with 1910, the year in which the armed conflict in Mexico, known as the Revolution, begins. In their aesthetic search, both will approach Spanish realism, experiment with cubism, and the influence of Cézanne's art will become evident. Both will be muralists and both will have a relationship with a Russian woman. The two returned to Mexico definitely, Rivera in 1921 and Zárraga 20 years later in 1941 at the beginning of the Second Great War. Zárraga chose the Parisian environment to continue with the study and research of creative process. Contact with the artist avant-garde made him see painting with different eyes. Although it is true that his creation was favored with external influences, such as that of a late Cubism, in which he develops his own expression not so attached to the Cubist premise, a fact for which it is assumed that Guillaume Apollinaire called him the angel of Cubism. Nevertheless, his creation is above all the result of a powerful imagination, knowledge, and technical skill, approaching various styles and currents in force during the first decades of the last century, such as symbolism and, as already mentioned, a late Cubist, and after his passage through the later, he would continue his path with a certain influence of Cézanne. In addition to the human figure, portraits, religious paintings, sacred themes, and landscapes, without departing from the best plastic tradition, guided by the works of the masters, the styles of the time, and the representatives of the artistic avant-garde. Ángel Zárraga would give an interesting turn to his creation, focusing especially on themes related to women. From the blessed to the footballer, and mainly the woman who belongs to a very particular female type, the femme fatale, beautiful, seductive, and dangerous. From the pictorial vision of woman through the eyes of Ángel Zárraga, I choose three words that exemplify these female types: the blessed, the femme fatale, and the athlete. Singular, very particular, specific roles, especially the femme fatale, with an important presence in literature and the visual arts. I will refer to these paintings in the first instance like a business card of the Mexican painter, regardless of the multiply and diverse interpretation that can be given to them. Those are oil paintings on canvas of large dimension, the three of them, and in vertical format. In order of creation, we have in the first place Les Femmes et le Pantin of 1909. 5 years after his arrival in the old continent, Zárraga made this painting, in which he presents us with a beautiful young naked woman, sexually provocative, controlling the destiny of man, who by giving in to her charms is subdued by the desire and stripped of will, which, as we already seen, is part of the imitation of this lecture. Its title, and certainly the idea of the work, come from the novel by the French writer Pierre Louis, which was published in 1898. It narrates the calculated and relentless process of alienation and humiliation of Don Mateo, a wealthy Spanish nobleman, because of the seductive and always evasive and tireless Conchita. In the painting, the Hispanic setting of the story is suggested by the sumptuous Manila shawl with which the beautiful lady covers her forearms and serves as a background to the splendor of her beautiful naked body. On her head, she was placed a transparent black veil decorated with a circular jewel. From her neck hangs a skull-shaped charm, and on each of her fingers she wears a ring, thus multiplying the signs of artificially with which she adorns and amplifies the power of her striking beauty. She holds in her hands the wreaths that give movement to the disheveled body of a doll or puppet kneeling by her side, who wears a carnivalesque flowered tunic, pink, from which emerge the thick and flabby fingers of a hand and an arm made of tufted cloth. The pelele is a cloth doll filled with straw or cloth in a human shape that is blanket or satin festivities and installed or balconies, used in popular festivals and carnivals. It is also used as a decoratory pejorative adjective against a simple and easily manipulated person, or to name a useless or foolish person who does not stand out for his intelligence. But the most impressive thing about the romper is the face that emerged from a sort of inverted corolla of cloth or roof, a demon face, stained with white, black, and vermilion red like a mask of Japanese theater, and whose features denote anger and pain at the same time. The intensity of these grotesque fares was a contrasting setting, a sunny landscape that can be more Italian than Spanish, like sigue, due to the row of cypresses that accentuate the verticality of the dominatrix, and, by contrast, the subjugation of the puppet. In the distance, a high hill with a village at his foot can be seen in the background. With his work, it is clear that Zárraga at that time moved between two aspects. On the one hand, the Spanish modernism evident by the landscape, the execution of the painting, the handling of light and color, the sensuality in the treatment of the male body, and on the other, the symbolist theme, the femme fatale, the woman as temptation and perdition of men. The image and idea of the femme fatale arose with the apparition of the symbolist movement at the end of the 19th century. Especially poets and painters began to represent the night in the form of a woman, voluptuous, seductive, and malevolent, who, through her sensuality, consumes men who allow themselves to be trapped by her and her charm. By the beginning of the 20th century, the image of the femme fatale was widely represented as a symbol of the vices and excesses to which the poor men who were not virtuous were exposed. As far as symbolism is concerned, one of the movements that emerged at the end of the 19th century, one of the most important ideas, one of the favorite themes both for writers, especially poets, and plastic creators, is that of the femme fatale, the young, beautiful, sensual, and provocative woman, usually evil and dangerous, who drives men crazy. The writer Pierre Félix Louis was born in Ghent in 1870, died in Paris in 1925. Naturalized French, he was a writer, poet, novelist, translator, and also photographer. He began as a writer at the age of 18 with his first erotic text. In 1894, he published an erotic collection of 143 songs entitled The Songs of Virities, Les Chansons de Virities, forgive my French, with lesbian themes divided in 3 sections. He published it as if it were the work of a Greek courtesan and contemporary of Sappho, that the author had only translated, but also the deception is discovered that it wasn't true. The work is praised even his friend, the musician and composer Claude Debussy, composed an adaptation, and by 1977, David Hamilton made the film version. In 1896, he published his first novel, Aphrodite, about the life of a courtesan in Alexandria. Another of his works, Les Adventures du Roi Pausol, would be illustrated by Sugiharu Fujita. It was in 1898 that he wrote Les Femmes et les Patines, made into a film, twice the first with Marlene Dietrich, The Devil is a Woman, and the second in 1959 with Brigitte Bardot. The 1910 Gift is another example that includes as outstanding figures 2 young women who are totally naked, sexually seductive and provocative. Both were beautiful Manila shawls. One of them is barely covered with hairs, and the other wears a transparent veil as a tunic. The 2 women cover their heads with transparent black veils and are in the company of 2 old men, one of them partially naked. Without delving further into what the image can represent, I will only add that the theme obviously alludes to women as a temptation, and it is, in this work, as an invitation to reflect about the age, the women and the old men. Like I see. The Bread and Water of 1911, made in Florence, presents as part of the composition a self-portrait of the painter, together with two beautiful women. To Zárraga's left, one of them carries a loaf of bread on a tray, covers her head with a transparent black veil that appears from the first time in La Femme et le Patin, repeats in the last we saw, and in these works, and also we include the veil will be included in the painting that we'll see below. The next is the Exvoto San Sebastian. The Exvoto, this is just an example to show you what is a Exvoto. The Exvoto is a small painted print that illustrates the grace or a miracle grading, usually made on a metal sheet that began to be known as Exvotos from the 19th century. Like this. Many have been the artists, especially the painters, who have dealt with the figure of San Sebastian, especially from the Renaissance onwards. Botticelli, Michelangelo, in a fragment of the Last Judgment in the 16th Chapel, Andrea Mantegna, Antonello de Messina, Perugino, Il Sodoma, no, el anterior, Il Sodoma, El Greco, José de Rivera, and Alonso Berruguete, among many others, from a long list. During the 19th century, several French artists, such as Camille Corot, François-André Vincent, Odilon Redon, and Gustave Moreau, included it as a part of the themes to be represented. Even the British filmmaker Derek Harman recreated his life in the 1976 film Sebastiane. San Sebastian was a saint and a martyr. Born in Narbonne, Gaul, present-day France, in 256. He is included in both Catholic and Orthodox hagiography. His feast is celebrated on January 20. He is invoked and venerated against the plague, epidemics in general, and the enemies of religion. He was a Roman tribune, a soldier, who, for not renouncing his Christian faith, the Emperor Maximilian, disappointed by him, condemns him to be tortured. The Emperor's soldiers take him to the stadium, stripping him naked. They tied him to a post and threw a rain of arrows at him, leaving him for dead. But he was not dead. His friends take him to the house of a Roman Christian noblewoman. It is known that Santa Irene, who helps him and hides him until his recovery. He was advised to leave Rome, but he refused. He confronted the emperor for the persecution of Christians, and Maximilian ordered him to be whipped to death. He was buried on the Appian Way in the catacomb that bears his name. He died in the year of 288. I would like to briefly mention that there are also representation, as you know, of male martyrdom and torture. For example, Santa Ursula will have the same type of martyrdom as San Sebastian, but at the hands of it was by the hands of Attila the Hun. The legend has that Ursula and 10 maidens who accompanied her fell the hands of the Huns when they, Santa Ursula and the 10 maidens, do not want to lose their virtues, all the women were beheaded, and Ursula died by the arrows in her chest, and they were not 11,000 virgins, like the legend says, maidens that the erroneous idea that was the Ursula and the 11,000 virgins provoked like a document in which the inscription was misunderstood. So that's not Santa Ursula and 11,000 virgins. Within Christian iconography, it is one of the most represented images of saints, mainly from the Renaissance onwards. At the beginning of the devotion, he was represented dressed as a soldier. His attire will be modified over the centuries until the 15th, when he begins to represented naked. The pole can vary by a tree or a column, as well as the stage, the number and location of the arrows. Because of the type of martyrdom and its iconography, the homosexual community considers Saint San Sebastian part and representative of their community. This work deserves a particular analysis in relation to the theme of sexuality, which can suggest several interpretations. The pictorial language contains distinctively erotic tones. Returning to Zárraga painting, it is believed that the Italian painter Amedeo Modigliani, who was a friend of him, served as a model for the figure of San Sebastian. The languor of the saint figure and his nakedness contrast with the demure attire, the rigidity and severity of the young woman who prays kneeling at his feet and who wears a transparent white veil covering her head. In the background, to right of the sun, there is a cartouche placed on a blue wall, and on which the following inscription can be seen. Lord, I do not know how to celebrate you like the poet in complicated verses, but accept, Lord, this raw and humble work that I have done with mortal hands. Ángel Zárraga. In these works, the veil is an element, an object rich in suggestions that relates this idea of innocence, modesty against temptation. The eternal feminine, sin and sinner. Likewise, the painter points out with color the difference in meaning. In La Femme and in the other examples, the gift and the bread and water, also there appears the women with the veils, and then La Femme and the others, the veil is black, so that's supposed to make an allusion to temptation and sin, and the white and this veil is white in the woman here in the ex voto, referring personally to the purity, modesty, and chastity of the demure young woman of her knees. So this is one of the ways we can learn, read the work, but there must another, like I said, about the sexual tones. As an example of the sacred themes that Zárraga made, this is his version of the Three Kings, also from 1912, as well as this photo, a work that is worth highlighting for its execution, composition, and reference to the painter Gustav Klimt in the figure of the wise man on the right. The Footballers of 1922. Zárraga made this painting in 1922, the same year that Giacometti came to study in Paris. In one way or another, the painter, both in life and after his death, was closely linked to sport, which he considered a window to modern life. His painting was a part of the art competitions of the 1928 and 1932 Summer Olympic Games. For the World Cup held in Mexico in 1986, 5 commemorative postage stamps were issues that includes his paintings. For Zárraga, the soccer theme, especially during the decade of the 20s, would be of great importance, especially he was interested in the study of the movement sought in sport, in particular in soccer, probably because his first wife, of Russian origin, Janet Ivanov, whom he married in 1919, was a rhythmic dance teacher and a soccer player, captain of the Sportifs de Paris team that managed to win the 1922 Women's Soccer Championship. Until the first World Cup in 1930, the most important event for football was the Olympic Games. By the way, held in Paris in 1942. The first official women's match was held in London in 1895, but the history of French women's football began only 1980, with the creation of the Women's Division led by the Federation of Women's Sport Societies of France. The first known French women's football match was held in 1910 at a girls' high school. The French Women's Football League only lasted until 1932, when women's football was banned in France. Zárraga paints the footballers celebrate the triumph of his wife's team, in which three females figures like he appears in the foreground. It is his wife on the left, Jeannette, and two players, Henriette and Thérèse, on the right, dressed in the team red and black uniform, shirt, shorts, and long socks. Zárraga has not omitted to represent them with a very muscular legs. They are standing outside the field delimited by the blue fence. At the feet of the captain, the ball can be seen, and on the left, a cartouche that refers to the recently achieved victory and the names of the three players, along with the date. In the background, we can see some players still on the field. In the background, you can see some buildings, trees, and a sky where it begins to get dark. If women's soccer teams face a lack of support today, we can imagine the problem in the middle of the 20s, not to mention that this type of activity in women was not very frequent as part of a woman's activities. Zárraga also made mural painting, scenography, illustrations for magazines, and as a part of his literary activity, he wrote newspaper articles and two poetry collections, in which Ode to France stand out. Let's see. Ángel Zárraga spent more than a half of his life in France, which is why his painting has a more French than Mexican expression. During his stay in Paris, his concept and creative process underwent a significant change. They were universalized while becoming individualized. Knowing new artistic movements led him to diversify and transform his plastic production. He liked modernity and the avant-garde of the first decades of the last century. The path that his painting traveled is summarized in the French experience that changed his way of seeing, thinking, and painting. Between 1934 and 1937, he made his last works in France, almost exclusively mural paintings, like I see, including the panels of the Mexican legation in Paris. 18 paintings to ornament the Hall of Honor of the legation, 11 of which are currently now in Mexico, in what was the former hotel of the Duchess of Eugenie and Chevreuse. This is one of the panels that are in Mexico now. And it was called France, a rose, a rose of France, sorry. With a mature body of work, his own language, and a life devoted to a plastic creation, he returned definitely to the country where he was born in 1941, after the outbreak of the Second World War. Upon his return to Mexico, he devoted himself mainly to mural work. He died in 1946 at the age of 60. I want to end this reading with the words that Louis Boxels says about Zárraga in 1920. Zárraga is a testimony of a warm heart and a solid head. The craft is wise to the measure of your desires, a smooth and sonorous enamel, the nourished bases, the bare backgrounds in place, the cold and warm tones classically alternating expand into the harmonies, sometimes soft, sometimes powerful, but this rigorous craft is present only to serve the expression, the composition, much sought after, remains flexible. The objects cannot be displayed in a painting by Zárraga. I have Zárraga as a great French colorist. Thank you very much.